Before we begin today's hearing, I want to take a moment to recognize someone who has served this committee and this institution with extraordinary integrity and commitment. Our Chief Clerk, Cameron Ricker. Will you stand, Cameron? Cameron has decided to stay. Oh, no.
Good.
Yes, exactly. He didn't know it either, by the way. Cameron has worked under three different chairmen, Senator Mike Crapo, Senator Sherrod Brown, and now me, and has served each of us with distinction. On behalf of the entire committee, thank you, Cameron, for your service to our country, to this committee, and to our institution. It is very challenging to find folks who serve not in a bipartisan fashion, but just as an American who wants to do the right thing for the country. And you are agnostic to red and blue, left or right. And that, in my opinion, makes you an outstanding asset for the committee and a strong example of what it means to put this nation before politics. Thank you for your service. We will miss you. We are here today to consider a strong slate of nominees put forward by President Trump to serve in key leadership positions across the federal government. These roles are not ceremonial. They are not optional. These are positions that directly impact the lives of American families, especially those who feel like Washington too often forgets them. As chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, I believe deeply that our job is not just to debate policies, but to deliver results. That means confirming qualified, capable public servants who are ready to go to work and get to work on the issues that matter the most to the American people. The nominees we will hear from today will serve in agencies that touch on every single aspect of our economy, from housing affordability to fighting illicit finance, to expanding American exports, to ensuring sound supervision in our banking system. Let me take a moment to recognize the nominees before us. Mr. Andrew Hughes, nominated to be the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, brings with him valuable operational experience that will help improve HUD. Mr. David Wolf, nominated to be the General Counsel at HUD, has decades of legal and policy experience in housing and is well positioned to provide the department with sound legal guidance as it works to expand opportunity for vulnerable Americans. The Honorable Michelle Bowman, nominated to serve as Vice Chairman for Supervision at the Federal Reserve, has already proven herself to have the ability and the character, and she has distinguished herself. She understands that financial regulators play an important role in our economy. When supervisors of banks fail to do their job, everyday Americans pay the price. So our financial regulators must be held to a very high standard. As Vice Chair for Supervision, Governor Bowman will bring accountability and transparency to the Fed and ensure it operates as an independent institution void of politics. John Hurley, nominated for Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Crimes at the Department of the Treasury, is being called to lead one of our government's most important national security and intelligence arms, from fighting money laundering and terrorist financing to levying and enforcing economic sanctions. This role is essential to protecting the integrity of our markets and holding malign foreign actors accountable. Mr. David Fogle, nominated to be Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Global Markets and Director General of the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service, brings a wealth of international business experience that will help American companies compete and win all across the globe. And finally, Mr. Landon Hyde, nominated to be the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Export Administration, has the background and perspective needed to ensure that the United States maintains its technological overmatch over competitors like China. These 6 nominees are well qualified, well prepared, and ready to serve. And the truth is, you're also very much needed in your positions today. The American people deserve a government that is focused on delivering solutions, not simply headlines. I look forward to hearing from each of the nominees today, and I encourage my colleagues to join me in advancing their confirmations so they can get to work on behalf of the American people. Thank you for your willingness to serve your country, our country, and Ranking Member Warren, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it has taken Donald Trump less than 3 months to bring the ghosts of the 2008 financial crisis back to life. The S&P 500 and Dow Jones are trading like meme coins. Treasury securities, the global safe haven in periods of turmoil, are being sold off. Businesses have put investments on hold. Companies are already announcing layoffs. Consumers are anticipating brutal price hikes on everyday goods. The economy is teetering because President Trump indiscriminately slapped massive tariffs on pretty much every country in the world for pretty much every product they sell to the United States. Trump's tariffs aren't strategic. They are not carefully designed. They won't promote jobs and industry here at home. They won't build resilient supply chains. They won't level the playing field for American workers against unfair trade practices. President Trump's incompetence risks hardworking American families enduring higher prices, lower pay, lost jobs, and broad economic devastation. We need policymakers who will do their jobs to protect the economy and protect working families. That includes this committee. We have jurisdiction over key aspects of the law that President Trump is using to impose tariffs. And, Mr. Chairman, every Democrat on this committee has asked you to hold a hearing on this chaos. We have a responsibility to conduct oversight and to ask hard questions. Republicans should also join Democrats to pass a resolution to turn off these remaining tariffs and to stop the power of Donald Trump to continue to play red light, green light with tariffs around the world. Congress has the power to contain some of the damage. Meanwhile, the Trump administration seems hell-bent on maximizing additional threats to our economy. Consider President Trump's nomination of Michelle Bowman to serve as the Federal Reserve Board's vice chair for supervision. This would make her the top watchdog, banking watchdog in the country. So she was confirmed in 2018 to be the Fed's first community bank governor. But she has spent her tenure at the Fed prioritizing Wall Street over Main Street. Governor Bowman has weakened safeguards that restrict banks from gambling with people's deposits. She has loosened rules that prevent derivatives from blowing up big banks. She has reduced Wall Street loss-absorbing capital requirements, which help prevent bank failures in times of economic stress. She's done that by tens of billions of dollars. In 2019, Governor Bowman voted to deregulate some of the largest banks in the country, including Silicon Valley Bank. How did that go? Well, a few years later, SVB and 2 other deregulated banks failed, constituting the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures in American history. President Trump is fanning the flames of disaster with his mismanagement of the nation's economy. Instead of showing up with the fire department, Governor Bowman brings a can of gasoline. We are also considering the nominations of 2 key nominees to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Secretary Turner and Elon Musk's Doge are currently wreaking havoc at HUD. They are indiscriminately canceling contracts and grants that keep people housed and help boost our housing supply. And they are reportedly working up plans to fire half of the HUD workforce. These actions will make it more difficult and more expensive for families to access housing. And that, in turn, will worsen America's housing crisis, just as the Trump recession bears down on us. Finally, we have 3 nominees for critical positions at Treasury and Commerce, including officials who will lead our trade and sanctions policies. They deserve their own hearing to answer hard questions about the way President Trump is undermining our economic and national security, including by launching the dumbest trade war in American history, doing nothing about officials who expose classified information on Signal, gutting national security agencies, and pushing the world economy closer to the brink of a meltdown. This committee should not just wave through these nominees who will be on the front lines of implementing those disastrous policies. The American people deserve better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. I will now swear in the nominees. Will you please rise and raise your right hand? Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God? Thank you. You may be seated. Your written statements will be made part of the record in its entirety. Please keep your oral comments to 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Mr. Hughes, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm honored by the President's confidence in nominating me to serve as Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I'm grateful to be considered for this responsibility. I would like to begin by thanking my mentor and dear friend, Dr. Ben Carson, who taught me so much about humility, compassion, and leadership. I'm also deeply grateful to Secretary Scott Turner, whose example of a servant leadership continues to guide and inspire me. I would not be here without the support and encouragement of my family. My mom and dad and my step-parents instilled in me the values of faith, hard work, and integrity. My late grandmother, Grammy, was a constant example of perseverance and a deep love for God. She taught me that no matter how hard life gets, you never quit, you never stop serving others, and you never stop believing that tomorrow can be better. My siblings, Matt, Haley, Ellen, Evan, and Caroline, there's a lot of us, are my biggest cheerleaders. I would also like to thank my mother-in-law, Linda, and my late father-in-law, Thomas, who also served this country in uniform and was a proud veteran. And above all, my wife, Kara, my partner, my rock, and my best friend, along with our children, Hope, Henry, and Reagan, remind me daily why this work matters so much. I also carry the memory of our daughter, Harper, who we hold in our hearts. Her brief life left an immeasurable mark on mine and strengthened my belief that every family deserves security, dignity, and hope. I grew up in a working-class family from Texas, and I was the first in my family to graduate from college. My passion for people and service began decades ago with an internship in this very body on Capitol Hill. That experience opened my eyes to how policy decisions directly impact real people. It was then I realized that I wanted to dedicate my career to helping others and to serving our country. Throughout my experience at HUD, first as White House liaison, then Deputy Chief of Staff, and later Chief of Staff, and in my role leading the American Cornerstone Institute, that passion for people and service has never changed. In fact, with each new opportunity, it only grew stronger. Each experience taught me valuable lessons. Each conversation left an impact. Each trip was eye-opening. Through the conversations, the visits to places outside of Washington, and the impactful policy, I saw how government, if done right, can be a force for good. I believe that safe, affordable housing is not just a government program, it's a foundation for opportunity, for stability, and for building generational hope. My time at HUD continues to show me just how much of a positive impact good policies can make on American communities, so many of which have been forgotten and left behind for far too long. If confirmed, I will spend each and every day in pursuit of HUD's mission, one of service, one of uplifting all Americans, and one that seeks to help make homeownership within reach for rural, urban, and tribal communities. Homeownership lies at the very heart of the American dream, and I firmly believe President Trump and Secretary Turner's leadership, that dream will become alive and well in America once again. If confirmed, I will work to increase housing supply, remove unnecessary barriers to home ownership, protect taxpayer dollars through accountability and transparency, and always keep the people we serve at the heart of every decision. I will advance policies that create opportunity, foster hope, and further greater experiment in self-government that we know as the United States of America. I will be guided by the belief that together we can set our forgotten men and women back on the path to self-sufficiency and independence to live as happy, healthy, and productive citizens of this country. This is not just a job to me, it's a calling rooted in the lessons taught by my family and shaped by a desire to give others the same chance at life that I was given. Yeah. Lastly, I would like to thank the current and previous colleagues I've worked with at HUD. They are a great group of people who truly care about America and serving the mission of HUD. It is a privilege to be considered for this opportunity, so thank you. I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wohl, please proceed.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren.
Maybe turn your microphone on. Thank you.
Should I start again?
Nah.
Okay. Yes, sir. I would also like to thank the committee and your staff for the courtesies you extended to me and my family during the confirmation process. Thank you as well to my friends and family for being with me today, some physically here and some with me in spirit. I deeply appreciate your love and support. My middle child is an Air Force officer currently deployed to the Middle East. He may be watching this hearing on his computer. We are thinking of you and look forward to your safe return home. And to all your colleagues, we thank them for their service. This year is a reflection point for me because it marks the 35th anniversary of my graduation from the University of Virginia School of Law. In those early days, like many of my law school classmates, I was recruited by and accepted a job with a large law firm where I was mentored by many fine lawyers who I still deeply admire and respect today. But I yearned to do something different. I wanted to make a real difference in the world. I got my first chance to do that in 1998 when I was hired as an enforcement attorney with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. My first investigation at the SEC involved a securities boiler room that targeted elderly investors. After thousands of hours of documents review and countless depositions, multiple indictments were ultimately issued to take down that den of thieves. I felt like I had made a positive difference in the lives of my fellow citizens, and I was hooked. I then had an opportunity to serve as an assistant U.S. attorney here in the District of Columbia. Like most prosecutors in the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, I began in D.C. Superior Court prosecuting violent crimes. In my first 3 years in the office, I prosecuted domestic violence and sexual assault cases, which was deeply fulfilling work. My colleagues and I prosecuted defendants who victimized some of the most vulnerable people in the community, including children and indigent women who had been battered and trafficked. The work was emotionally draining and grueling, but once again, I felt like I was making a difference in helping people. I later went on to serve as a federal prosecutor in Brooklyn, where I prosecuted business and securities fraud cases involving victims who were financially devastated by others who took advantage of them. This included prosecuting a $100 million Ponzi scheme and a Hurricane Katrina fraud case. After my time as a trial attorney with DOJ, I joined HUD as the Deputy General Counsel, where I continued to manage complex investigations. I believe this extensive trial experience will help me manage both affirmative and defensive litigation at HUD. I also have experience with a wide range of matters that are typically handled by HUD's Office of General Counsel. For example, while recently serving as first the Deputy General Counsel and then the General Counsel for the Special Inspector General for Pandemic Recovery, also known as SIGPER, I addressed legal questions concerning ethics, personnel matters, the Freedom of Information Act, and interagency agreements and cooperation. At SIGPER, I was also responsible for creating office policies on a wide range of issues, including agency information sharing and use of force. I also have legal management experience. As Deputy General Counsel at HUD, I managed 3 offices within the Office of General Counsel and more than 100 lawyers throughout the country. And at SIGPER, I managed a highly seasoned team of attorneys and bankers. I believe my career in government has prepared me now to head the legal office of HUD. I feel particularly privileged to be considered to lead this incredibly talented and professional team of lawyers, many of whom I've worked with before. From experience, I know that these attorneys genuinely care about helping those in need and providing a gold standard of legal services to the agency. If confirmed, I very much look forward to my next chapter at HUD. Again, thank you to the committee for your consideration of my nomination.
Thank you, Mr. Wool. We'll now turn to Governor Bowman. Please proceed.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am deeply honored and grateful for the trust and confidence that President Trump has placed in me by nominating me to fill the role of Vice Chair for Supervision for the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. I am also grateful to my family for their continued support. My husband, Wes, and our 2 children, Jack and Audrey, are here with me today. The rest of our family are watching from home in Kansas. My background as a community banker, as the Kansas State Bank Commissioner, and more than 6 years of experience as a member of the board and the FOMC has thoroughly prepared me to carry out the responsibilities of the Vice Chair for Supervision. During my tenure, I have served as the Oversight Governor for the Division of Consumer and Community Affairs, Chair of the Smaller Regional and Community Banking Subcommittee, member of the Payments Committee, and currently as Chair of the Committee on Supervision and Regulation. In all of my roles, I have worked to ensure the safety and soundness and fairness of the financial system to support a strong economy. If confirmed, I will prioritize reforming and refocusing supervision, restoring regulatory tailoring, ensuring a viable path for innovation in the banking system, and promoting transparency and accountability. First, supervision must be reformed and refocused to better address core and material financial risks. We have seen significant shortcomings in supervision over the past few years that must be addressed to ensure that the U.S. banking system is safe and sound. Supervision must be grounded in applicable law, and it must provide clear standards to regulated institutions. Supervisory expectations should not surprise regulated firms. Supervision cannot eliminate the risk from the banking system, but it can and it should promote sensible risk management that enables the banking system to support economic growth and serve the financial needs of all Americans. And should a bank fail, supervision should minimize and mitigate any harm to consumers, businesses, and the financial system. Second, regulations must be approached in a pragmatic way that ensures that they are efficient and effective. This pragmatic approach requires identifying the problem targeted by the regulation, considering the cost and benefits of any proposed change, as well as incentive effects, impacts on markets, and the potential unintended consequences. We must prioritize the identification and remediation of issues that may pose long-term structural problems to the banking system and the critical markets that it supports, including addressing regulatory disincentives to Treasury market intermediation activities by banks and by their affiliates. As I work toward improvements in bank regulation together with counterparts at the other agencies, I will continue to rely on a tailored approach, especially for community and regional banks. Tailoring is fundamental to ensuring that we maintain and enhance the diversity of the U.S. banking system, which must include and support banks of all sizes. The U.S. regulatory framework has grown expansively to become overly complicated and redundant, with conflicting and overlapping requirements. This growth has imposed unnecessary and significant costs on banks and their customers. Third, regulators must promote innovation in the banking system. To remain viable and competitive, banks must be able to consider new technologies that can improve products and services and lower costs. Regulators should adopt an approach that encourages and promotes sensible innovation. Finally, to promote accountability, regulators must be transparent, both in supervision and in regulation. Successful policymaking requires openness and humility, caution, and a deliberate approach. I can assure the committee that if I am confirmed as the Vice Chair for Supervision, I will be strongly committed to these values. As I've demonstrated throughout my career, I am committed to carrying out my responsibilities by objectively making decisions based on the best available information and input from community and business leaders, industry, consumer groups, academics, and Americans from across the country. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Hurley, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. Is the microphone on? All right. Thank you, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee. It's a great honor to appear before you as the President's nominee to lead the Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. And I want to thank President Trump, Vice President Vance, and Secretary Bessent for their trust and confidence in me. Several of you on the committee, including Chairman Scott, I've known personally and admired for many years. Others I've had the opportunity to meet over the last few weeks, and I want to thank all of you for your questions and thoughts. I look forward to working closely with all of you if I'm honored to be confirmed. I also want to say how grateful and humbled I am by the tremendous support I've received from my family and friends throughout this process. My three sons very much wanted to be here today, but a new product launch in New York, platoon leader duties in Germany, and college classes in New Jersey disrupted those plans. Also not with us today, but very much in our thoughts, are my late wife Camilla and her family, my late father, Brigadier General Alfred Hurley, my 95-year-old mother, Joanna Hurley, and my three brothers and sister. Kindly standing in for them are several close friends here from San Francisco. As the son and nephew of career Air Force officers, the brother and father of two Army officers, and as a former Army officer myself, I come from a family that has long been dedicated to the national security of the United States. During President Trump's first term, I served on his Intelligence Advisory Board, and I'm very grateful and excited at the prospect of serving our nation again. I'm particularly honored to be nominated for this crucial position at the intersection of our national security, foreign policy, and financial system. Treasury's Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, or TFI, brings together a broad and diverse range of Treasury's authorities and expertise, identifying, disrupting, and dismantling the financial networks that support terrorist groups, organized crime, weapons proliferators, and nations that threaten our security. When my father retired from the Air Force after a very fulfilling 30-year career, he became Chancellor and President of the University of North Texas, which he led for another very fulfilling 20 years. I remember thinking at the time how well his prior life experiences had prepared him for that challenge. I feel similarly about this role and my background. My academic studies and continuing involvement at Princeton and Stanford, my service in the military, on the President's Intelligence Advisory Board, and on the boards of organizations focused on foreign policy and national security, and the past 30 years building and leading an investment team, all would serve me well confronting adversaries who are not only dangerous and ruthless, but also often very sophisticated. If confirmed, I hope to marshal TFI's authorities for maximum tactical and strategic effect to meet the objectives set by the President and the Secretary, and to protect our citizens from those who would do us harm. I also look forward to leading the talented and dedicated TFI professionals and to working with you, Mr. Chairman, this committee, and its staff, and my interagency partners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fogle.
Chairman Scott, sorry. Is that on? Yes. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am honored to be nominated by President Trump to be Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Global Markets and Director General of the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service. I want to thank Secretary Lutnick for his support of my nomination. I also want to thank the committee for the opportunity to meet with many of you and members of your staff leading up to this hearing. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge my family members who are here with me today, my wife Meade and my 3 daughters Lucy, Lily, and Caroline. Senators, I was born and raised in Rochester, New York. My father was the first in his family to go to college and later became a business executive. My mother took care of our home and raised me and my siblings. Tragically, when I was in my mid-20s, she went in for a minor medical procedure and never came home. From a young age, my father instilled in me a strong sense of public service. Believe it or not, while I was just in middle school, I sat with him every Sunday morning watching political interview shows. His encouragement led me to attend the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. I stayed at Georgetown for 4 more years to earn my JD and MBA degrees. While in school, I interned for all 3 branches of the federal government, in the White House, on the Hill for 2 U.S. senators, and for a federal judge, as well as for former UN Ambassador Jeane Kirkpatrick. My professional career began at Sullivan & Cromwell in New York City as a corporate attorney focused on domestic and international transactions. From there, I went on to build 3 companies in 3 innovative sectors throughout my career, continuing to negotiate cross-border transactions. I had the privilege of serving in President Trump's first administration. Initially, I was the chief of staff at the Export-Import Bank, where I oversaw a team of professionals who executed billions of dollars of transactions for small, medium, and large U.S. companies. I also helped establish the bank's new financing program to compete with China, which had just been wisely mandated by the U.S. Congress. Subsequently, I moved over to the State Department, where I served as Senior Advisor and Chief Business Development Officer under Keith Kroc, the Undersecretary for Economic Growth. There, I continued my work helping U.S. companies compete with China and win deals abroad. I believe all of this experience, both private and public sector, prepared me well for the responsibilities I would take on within global markets in the event I am confirmed. The Global Markets team works with foreign governments to ensure fair access for U.S. companies, promotes the export of goods and services for U.S. companies of all sizes, and facilitates foreign direct investment into the United States. All of these are key priorities of President Trump and support the administration's goals of strengthening the American economy, supporting and creating American jobs, and boosting our economic and national security. If confirmed, I will work closely with the members of this committee and with Congress as a whole to ensure that Global Markets is as effective and successful as possible. Thank you again for your consideration of my nomination, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fogle. Mr. Hyde, you are recognized.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warner, distinguished senators, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am honored to be President Trump's nominee to be Assistant Secretary for Export Administration at the Bureau of Industry and Security. If confirmed, I pledge to carry out this critical responsibility with dedication, integrity, and urgency. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge my family who is here with me today, my father Brent, my mother Peggy, my uncle Blake. Without their support, this moment would not have been possible. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege of serving in government across multiple roles, from working as a diplomat at U.S. Embassy Beijing to serving as a professional staffer here in the halls of Congress. Yet in all of these positions, I have been focused on a singular mission, addressing the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party, particularly its ambitions to acquire sensitive U.S. technology for malign purposes. Most recently, I was a professional staff member on the House Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. We worked in a bipartisan fashion to raise awareness of the CCP's expansive and systematic efforts to get its hands on U.S. intellectual property and technology. Before that, I spent 5 years as a U.S. diplomat, again including at U.S. Embassy Beijing during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was there that I experienced firsthand the dystopian future the CCP has in store for the world if their impulses are not kept in check. Xi Jinping has called on China to occupy the commanding heights of science and technology competition and has implemented vast national strategies such as military-civil fusion and dual circulation to accomplish this goal. China's determined pursuit of emerging technologies such as AI, quantum computing, biotechnology, advanced semiconductors represent a profound threat to U.S. economic and national security. Whichever nation achieves dominance in these technologies will shape the future world economic and technological order. No agency or office is arguably more central to winning the technology competition with China than the Commerce Department's Bureau of Industry and Security. Using authorities granted by Congress, BIS has the ability to restrict the transfer of our most advanced technologies to adversaries like China and the foreign companies that do the CCP's bidding. I want to stress the long-standing bipartisan nature of export controls as a critical tool of national security. In his first term, President Trump imposed sweeping export controls on Huawei for conducting espionage on behalf of the CCP. Following President Trump's actions, the last administration followed his lead and imposed similar controls on advanced semiconductor technology going to China. But there is so much more work to be done. President Trump has taken decisive action early on to address this threat. On day one of the new administration, President Trump announced his America First trade policy, where he called for a closing of loopholes in our export control regime to prevent our strategic adversaries from gaining access to our sensitive technologies. President Trump followed this 30 days later with his America First investment policy that called out CCP-affiliated entities for targeting the, quote, crown jewels of U.S. technology, farmland, minerals, and other sensitive sectors. I also want to acknowledge the importance of working with partners and allies on this objective. The U.S. alone does not possess all of the world's most advanced technologies, and we will need to work with other countries to ensure that China is fully denied critical goods necessary to its technology ambitions. If confirmed as Assistant Secretary, I look forward to working with Congress to rigorously carry out these policies, enforce export control measures, and ensure our sensitive technologies do not bolster China's strategic capabilities. I am fully committed to protecting our national security, promoting transparency, and ensuring accountability in all of our efforts. Thank you again for this opportunity. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hyde. We'll start the questions off with Senator Moreno from Ohio.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me just start and say to the six of you, thank you. Thank you for willing to serve your country. We get to see some incredibly qualified candidates, and I think you guys have set a new bar. So thank you for being here, and thank you again for wanting to jump in to serve. Let's talk about where we are in the economy. It's been 81 days since President Trump took office, and let's compare his report card over less than 3 months compared to where we were at the beginning of the Biden administration. The ranking member talked about an apocalypse in the economy. So under Biden, thanks to Congress and Biden's actions, we had generationally high inflation. Wages weren't even close to keeping up with the price of goods. Basics, food, energy, transportation, housing became completely unaffordable. What's happened in the last 81 days? We have a new inflation report today. Inflation is at an all-time low compared to the last 5 years. Energy prices are down 30%. Egg prices are down 50%. Private sector employment is surging. We have a completely secure border. So when I think about what's happening in the housing world, what does it mean to have 10 million people not coming into our country illegally and the impact on housing? We have gone from border crossings of 350,000 a day to less than 5,000 a month. I'm sorry, 350,000 a month to less than 5,000 a month. We've got peace around the world. We don't have a war in the Middle East. That's going to be resolved. We don't have a war. We're going to get a war resolved in Eastern Europe. And we're finally standing up to China. DEI has been completely dismantled. Happily, we are not giving Harvard $9 billion in federal funding to to enrich their endowment, which already stands at $50 or $60 billion. They own most of the city of Cambridge. It means that if you're a Boston school teacher, you can't live in Cambridge because your property taxes have to pay for the services for the whole town. We have tax reform coming, and of course, our regulations have been slashed. So let me just go quickly. I just wanted to set the record straight on where we are. I think it's pretty darn good, 81 days compared to 4 years of abject disaster. So I'll start with you, Mr. Hughes. What do you see going forward in terms of housing, not having to take care of millions of illegal migrants? What does that mean to the people who actually are Americans who need help with housing?
Thank you, Senator, and good to see you again. I appreciate the question. With the president shutting down the border and the influx of more than 10 million people into the United States, one, that's going to help us rebound in the housing supply crisis. And, he's made it a priority, so Secretary Turner, to bring down housing prices and cut unnecessary regulations. And one of the first things that Secretary Turner did when he got to HUD was start a regulatory reform task force, which has been working very hard with program offices and other agencies to identify not only federal but state and local regulations that we can eliminate to help with the housing supply issue. In addition to that, Secretary Turner and Secretary Burgum recently signed a MOU regarding the federal land, so we're very excited about that opportunity, and the teams are starting to meet. So a lot of good things underway, Senator.
Perfect. Well, thank you. And Governor Bowman, I'll ask you some questions. I got some conflicting information at the beginning of the hearing. Where are you from again?
I'm from Kansas.
So you're not from Wall Street.
I am not.
Have you lived in New York City? Have you lived in New York City?
Lived in New York City.
Has your family lived in New York City?
No, we're all from
So
Kansas.
to say that somebody in Kansas understands the plight of Main Street, that's the heartland, like Ohio. You understand what crippling banking regulations. Explain to me what that means to a small business. When nothing against J.P. Morgan Chase or Bank of America, have they had a tough 4 years? I mean, have they been suffering?
I would say that having been a community banker, I understand, and the compliance officer in my family's bank that was chartered in 1882.
Is that a multi-trillion-dollar bank?
No, it's about 200 million in assets, and that's a million with an M, not a B. So it's a very small bank. It's small staff. Just implementing the regulations. When I was a banker, we implemented the Dodd-Frank regulations. It is very complex, very difficult, especially to help your staff understand the expectations for implementation.
Well, my time is up, but I'm going to say this. I'm so excited to have you in that job because I think Wall Street's had plenty of representation in this body, and it's good to see somebody actually represents Main Street and understands what the heartland, what the working people of this country go through and what they need for banking. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Ranking Member Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So anyone who's been awake for the last week has seen the self-inflicted economic maelstrom that both the United States and the world have lived through. The Trump administration is living in a fantasy land and evidently not living there alone. According to Team Trump, the economy is booming, tariff money is rolling in, massive tax cuts for billionaires will be free, and the research scientists DOGE has fired from the National Institute of Health and the customer service specialists that they fired from the Social Security Administration are happily screwing in tiny little iPhone screws as they work in iPhone factories that have magically sprung up across the country. Look, the Trump administration is in desperate need of financial regulators who live in the real world. Governor Bowman, if confirmed, you would be the #1 financial cop on the beat during an incredibly dangerous time. As we've learned from previous crises, the tremors in the financial system can lead to avalanches in the rest of the economy and vice versa. You would be the person on the front line of defense to prevent that from happening. So Chair Powell said that President Trump's tariffs will lead to, and I quote, both higher unemployment and higher inflation. We've seen wild swings in the financial markets over the past week. At least some of us have seen them. Governor Bowman, I want to understand how you see the risks of the current moment. In what ways could President Trump's tariffs and their economic effects threaten the stability of our financial system?
Well, Senator, that's a great question, and I'd like to start by stating that the economy is strong.
Okay, fine, but answer my question if you would, please. Well, we're going to be limited on time. We've got a tough chairman here.
Economic growth has been solid, and though it may be slowing, and the unemployment rate is still historically low. Inflation came down today, as we saw with the recent CPI report.
Okay.
And I think that
Governor Bowman, could you
of
answer
the
my
economy
question, please? I asked in what ways President Trump's tariffs and their economic effects threaten the stability of our financial system. Chair Powell has already identified it: higher inflation and higher unemployment. I'd like to hear from you what ways you think Trump's tariffs potentially threaten our financial system.
Senator, as you know, the mandated goals, or the goals that have been mandated by Congress for the Federal Reserve, are maximum employment and price stability. And as the path for these policies continues to
Could you
evolve,
use the word tariff? My question, I've asked it now twice, is in what ways do President Trump's tariffs threaten the financial system? Jay Powell has already answered this question. You're over at the Fed. Could you just give me a straight answer on that?
I think as we were watching and waiting to see how the path for these policies continues to evolve, we'll understand what the economic effects of
So are
those
you saying
policies
you
will
don't
be.
know if the tariffs could have any effect on the financial system?
Well, I think it's unclear at this point, since we don't know how the economic policies will be.
So let me get
calibrated
this straight.
and what their effects on the industries will be.
President Trump's tariffs threatened to strangle the economy. This is according to the Fed chair. The stock market is experiencing the kinds of swings we don't see outside financial crises. Even Treasury securities, they're supposed to be resilient when people fly to safety, have started to experience volatility. And you don't see any risks to the financial system? Nothing? You got nothing for me here?
Senator, what I would tell you is that we're starting on a strong economic foundation.
Okay, what I'm hearing is nothing.
As we see
So
that
look,
there has been
the
volatility
worst
in the stock
scenario
market that's
we
existed
have
for
here is
a
that
number of
this
years.
Trump-inflicted economic crisis undermines confidence in our financial system. Banks and other lenders may face huge losses as households and businesses struggle to meet their debt payments if we plunge into a recession. Hedge funds and other leveraged financial firms are already facing margin calls and may be forced to dump assets, including treasuries, at fire sale prices. Financial instability would amplify the harms of these irrational tariffs. And you want to just sit here and say, oh, it's all good. So let me ask you, Governor Bowman, will you immediately conduct a stress test of the big banks to probe whether they can endure a deep and prolonged recession triggered by a massive trade shock? Just run the tests. Are you willing to do that?
We have a process for stress testing that has already been underway this year, and it will continue to move forward as we planned.
So are you saying you will not run a stress test immediately? Is that exactly right? You're just, all of the things that have happened in the last week and in the last 2 months, you're just going to cover your eyes and cover your ears and say, I'm sure the banks will be fine. We'll check them out in several months.
Senator Warren, we are always watching the
Always watching, but
conditions.
not running a stress test. I apologize for going over, Mr. Chairman. Lord.
Chairman Kennedy,
Governor Bowman.
the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
You're a fine American.
Thank you.
You still have to pay your taxes, though.
I do.
On May 1st now because of
I understand.
Hurricane Helene.
I got an
Thank you.
extension on mine.
I'm very excited about that. I'll extend to you 30 seconds for this
Thank you.
colloquy.
Governor Bowman, briefly, if you will, because we've got to go vote. What's the Basel III end game?
It's an international agreement of different countries that participate in the Basel Accords.
What's its objective?
to ensure that there's parity across jurisdictions for financial regulation and a level playing field.
It calls for more regulation of American banks, doesn't it?
In some cases, it does, yes.
Your predecessor, Mr. Barr, loved Basel III Endgame like the devil loves sin, didn't he?
He embraced it in his proposal.
He bear hugged it. He French kissed it. What problem are we trying to solve with Basel III Endgame?
The original proposal was intended
No,
to increase
Mr. Barr's
capital.
proposal.
Right.
What problem are we trying to solve? We have stress tests right now for banks, right?
That's absolutely correct.
And we have capital standards, right?
We do.
What's broken about it?
I think we'll need to take a fresh look at the last Basel agreement and determine what's appropriate for U.S. banks and their ability to have a level playing field across around the world.
Well, let me put it another way. Washington has this propensity, when something's not broken, is to take it apart and loosen a few screws so that it will be. Now, if there's some problem that we're trying to solve with adopting these international standards, I'd like to know it. I asked that repeatedly of Mr. Barr, and he never could. I mean, he was and is. I like him very much, very smart. He's also a silver-tongued devil. He could talk a dog off a meat wagon. And he never answered that question. And so it seems to me that what the Board of Governors has to do is come back and tell us what's broken. Let me ask Mr. Fogle, what's the International Monetary Fund? Briefly, if you don't mind.
Senator, to be honest, I know what it is, but it actually isn't related to the job I've been nominated for, which is global markets at Commerce. It probably better handled by Treasury Department.
All right, that's fair. I understand a dodge when I see it. You did that pretty artfully. How about you, Mr. Hurley? I bet you know.
Yes, sir. I do know what the IMF is, and
Briefly, if you don't mind.
well, so again, it would be my colleague who will get.
You own the IMF. You know. I'm hoping you're not telling me you don't know what the IMF. If you're going to be in charge of terrorism and financial crimes.
So yes, sir. I'm very familiar with the IMF. It won't be. I'll have sanctions at TFI and be working with law.
The IMF loans money to other countries, right? Who puts up most of the money for the IMF?
The United States, sir.
That's right. There are about 190 countries in it, and by far we put up most, right?
Yes, sir.
What are special drawing rights?
I'm not terribly familiar with special drawing rights.
You need to get familiar.
Yes, sir.
Special drawing right is when the IMF gets together and decides to declare a dividend to all of the countries. And it's like a dividend. It's really a sheet of paper that says any country can take these dividends, a sheet of paper, and go redeem it for the currency of any other country. And Secretary Yellen did that. She to the tune of $650 billion. And she dodged congressional approval by coming for an amount just below the trigger for us to approve it. We gave money to Iran, to Russia, to China, and we're putting up the money. Why aren't we doing that?
Are you asking me, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I completely agree, sir.
Well, I've got a bill to say that whenever the Treasury catches a wild hare and decides they want to give away American taxpayer money to Iran, as Treasury Yellen did, that she has to come to Congress for approval. You'll support that, won't you?
I look forward to looking at the legislation, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of the chair, Senator Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Quasi-Chairman. Or
I am in charge.
That explains a lot.
Homage to
that
Al Haig.
explains a lot. Do you remember the last guy that said that?
Yeah, Al Haig.
Al Haig, yeah. Do any of the panel remember Al Haig? Okay. Glad to see a few adults. Governor Bowman, it's great to see you again. I appreciated our conversation we had earlier in the week. I want to drill down on a couple of things we talked about. First and foremost is the importance of maintaining the independence of the Fed. And, clearly when we've seen the level of erratic decision-making coming out of the administration over the last couple of weeks on tariffs, the notion that there's some reasonable group of adults in the room that will be a backstop, I think has to be the Fed. And I think, again, monetary policy would be you guys' purview and not based upon political pressure. Can you, again, commit to me that you'll stand up for the independence of the Fed, even if that means going against Mr. Vogt and OMB?
Absolutely, Senator Warner. It is important that we maintain our independence with respect to monetary policy and the responsibilities that we have that are related to the economy.
Well, if what happens if OMB suddenly try to put a requirement in place that said the Fed has to check on all their rulemaking process with the White House before you make your rulemaking? That would be also part of the independence of the Fed in my mind, and I hope you would say that would be inappropriate.
Well, I think that we haven't seen that happen at this point, and I think that
The key word in that sentence may be "at this point," but go ahead.
No, but I appreciate that concern, and I agree with the principles of cost-benefit analysis and ensuring that we've identified a problem that needs to be solved and that we need to provide an analysis that supports rulemakings that we put forward. So I wouldn't think that we would have challenges with any rulemakings that we might like to engage in.
Well, again, I think we are in uncharted territory, and I imagine you're going to get confirmed, but I think you got unanimous confirmation the last time, but boy, oh boy, it's a different time and different administration than the first Trump administration, and that independence of the Fed has got to be maintained. And I know my friend from North Carolina believes that as well. One of the other things I wanted to touch on, and we raised in our conversation, was the better usage of the discount window. I think before we start adding other regulations, making sure that the tools we've used are fully used. And we understand the stigma that comes sometimes by using the discount window, but having some either occasional use or demonstration that you have got that ability to use those tools. And you also, I thought, had some good ideas about making sure that the collateral that would potentially might be at the Federal Home Loan Bank, Federal Home Loan Banks might be able to be kind of easily moved back and forth to the Fed. Can you just talk a little bit more about the usage of the discount window?
Thank you, Senator. The discount window is a very important tool for the banking system and for the Federal Reserve. It is critically important that it operates appropriately and efficiently. So that's one of the things that we've engaged in over the last year or so is to work with our reserve banks to ensure that we have a process for usage of the discount window that is appropriately speedy, and that it's used in a way that can be of assistance in a timely way. I appreciate that you are referring to our conversation about the collateral. Generally, the FHLB provides liquidity to the entirety of the banking system and a few others in the financial system as well. It is very important, since most every bank in this country uses the FHLB system for liquidity on a daily basis in some cases, that there's a process that's effective and efficient to be able to transfer that collateral if there is a need to use the discount window in a way that's...
Well, I may want to push you more on kind of
course.
a mandatory occasional use, episodic use. I just think this is, SVB, as we all know, is violation of Banking Rules 101, but it was also a case that they were totally unprepared to use that tool. I want to make sure I get in one last question before my time runs out. Mr. Hyde, the last administration took some, I think, important steps on trying to limit spyware, and we know that has been used on surveillance of American diplomats. As we all also know, spyware, you can insert malware without actually having control of the device. I'm really concerned about this since, candidly, we've got senior administration officials making classified information on signal chats that, by the way, we don't even have knowledge yet from the administration whether they have taken those phones back and made sure that malware was not inserted, because we know China and Russia is actively trying to work on penetrating Signal and other encrypted apps. If you're confirmed, how do we make sure that you at BIS will make sure that we keep those restrictions on this kind of spyware in place that the last administration put in place?
Yeah, Senator, thank you for the question, and I appreciate your leadership on this topic. I know this is something you've cared about for a long time. I know we're short on time, so I'll just shortly say the Department of Commerce, as you know, has an authority called ICTS that allows it to restrict foreign adversary technology products in the United States if it poses a variety of risks, to include cybersecurity risks. President Trump, in his sort of America First trade policy announcement on day one, specifically called for review and strengthening of that authority to start adjudicating and using that authority more. I think the last administration started off right, kind of looking at things like interconnected vehicles and stuff. But there's a lot of devices, as you know, that are still in our economy that pose these risks. So look forward to working with you and your staff on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My turn. Congratulations to all of you on your confirmations. Good news. I've only got time to ask Governor Bowman a question. One thing I wanted to clear up, I believe the senator from Massachusetts attacked you for not immediately initiating Fed stress tests following the announcement of President Trump's tariff strategy. I just want a clarification here. Did your predecessor, Vice Chair Barr, launch a Fed stress test when SVB failed?
No, sir, he did not.
Did he launch a stress test when inflation reached 40-year highs?
No.
Yeah. Even if the Fed regularly did this, wouldn't it be that vice chair that Senator Warren should have directed the questions towards? The person who was in the role at the time?
That might be more appropriate, yes.
Okay, thank you. You got community banks, regional banks, large foreign banks, and GSIBs, and 2,300 plus bank examiners crawling around their organizations every day. Want to talk a little bit about trends. Are you aware of instances when Fed supervision failed to focus on glaring core prudential risk?
Yes.
Give me an example.
Silicon Valley Bank.
Are you aware of instances when Fed supervision was encouraged to focus on ancillary issues that distracted from assessing core prudential risk?
Yes.
Give me an example.
I think we've seen reports of that throughout our supervision and regulation reports that we publish twice a year.
Are you aware of instances when Fed examiners change supervisory expectations even within the course of an ongoing examination?
I have heard accountings of this, yes.
I'd like maybe for the record, if we can point out some glaring examples, that would be helpful for the committee. Do you believe the Fed has always adequately considered the distinct differences between the four separate supervisory strata, the banks that I was talking about, when crafting regulatory and supervisory requirements?
I think over the last year or a few years, we have strayed from the statutory responsibility of regulatory tailoring, and what I'd like to refocus our regulatory activities is instilling more usage of regulatory tailoring that's appropriate to the size, the risk, the business model, and the institution that we're looking to apply regulation to.
Do you believe the Fed training of examiners has always armed staff to adequately carry out core prudential risk supervisory duties?
I look forward, if I'm confirmed, to having a better understanding of how prepared our examiners are to ensure that we can identify the risks within the system.
Is it fair to say that some of the problems that were encountered with the examination of Silicon Valley Bank may have related to improper training and execution?
I think that's a possibility, but I'd like to do an independent third-party review that would help us identify some of the issues that we should be identifying and.
That's a perfect answer. I'm looking back only to be instructed on how to better perform in the future, and that's exactly how we should do it. There's a lot of examiners out there that are doing a good job. They're following the rules. There are some others that either need training or re-education. So to the examiners out there, I know that many of them do a good job. I speak with a lot of banks. I did back when I was advising banks in the private sector. So, but we've got to up the game, and I think some of that comes through training and more consistent examination processes. I came in on the part of Senator Kennedy's comments, and I think that people may need to understand that to the extent that we're looking at Basel is to give some certainty on what we are or not going to do.
Correct.
And so people should not, I was completely offended and totally thrilled when Barr failed to get Basel III endgame done, and he was rushing. So let me just say that was a happy day when it was clear he wasn't going to be successful. But we do need to look at it. We need to position it. We need to give certainty to the banks and the regulated entities. And I do believe, so Basel, that's just dealing with Basel. Because he referred to CCAR and stress testing. I, for one, think CCAR and stress testing are broken. I believe that, unless you're a partner at Price Waterhouse, I mean, we were paid enormous sums of money to make sure that the banks were compliant with regulations that were at the risk of money that they could spend in the communities or capital that could flow. They're having to pay consultants to make sure they're compliant. There's got to be a better way to identify the specific risk without going through 100,000 pages. So CCAR and stress test is broken. And as you move forward, are you going to see opportunities to actually reduce the cost and maintain the outcomes that we need to understand any systemic risk that we have in our banking system?
Senator, yes. And first, let me address the stress testing observations that you've made. I agree on many levels with the observations that you have. I think we are taking a closer look at the appropriateness of the way the stress tests have been implemented, and we'll be making some conclusions about that going forward. So I look forward to improving that process.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. I look forward to supporting your confirmations. On behalf of the chair, Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Congratulations to all of you on your nominations. Mr. Wool, let me start with you. You served at HUD in the previous administration, correct?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah, and the HUD Inspector General reported that HUD knowingly stalled sending hurricane relief funding to Puerto Rico after missing a legally required deadline to do so. And according to the Inspector General report, you repeatedly mishandled congressional appropriations. Those funds were supposed to aid Puerto Ricans responding to the devastation of Hurricane Maria in 2017. According to the report, you refused to answer questions and lied about the delays. So with that, knowing that report is out there, Mr. Wool, why should I trust you to be general counsel for HUD?
Well, Senator, I would like to clarify. I don't think that the IG found that I refused to provide information. In fact, I made myself available for 2 interviews with the Inspector General. One lasted approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours. The second one lasted an equal amount of time. I also went up to T-HUD to testify there, where I testified and answered every single question. I always assisted the IG in their investigation. I can tell you that Puerto Rico received $20 billion in funds. And to put it in comparison, the initial allocation.
So can I ask you, though, did according to the Inspector General's report, you or somebody within HUD mishandled the congressional appropriations? Those funds were supposed to aid Puerto Ricans, and it didn't get to them in the required deadline. Was that correct, or was not correct?
Well, the concern throughout all of HUD was that there was a lot of tumult in Puerto Rico at the time. They had 3 governors in 3 weeks. They had $2 billion available to them, essentially in their line of credit, And at the time that this issue happened, they had only spent about $500,000.
Do you have the
on admin.
authority and the discretion to make that decision, or did you violate the deadline that was set by Congress?
No, we were just serving as good stewards of money and making sure that the money that was allocated to Puerto Rico went to the
I
citizens
understand
of
that,
Puerto
but
Rico.
that's not what the report said. It said you actually violated congressional requirements in making sure the money got to Puerto Rico. And so that's my concern. You're going to be general counsel, and you're disregarding already congressional intent and what Congress has actually voted on to send money to Puerto Rico.
Well, first of all, Senator, I can assure you and I can assure the committee that as general counsel, I will always follow the law and the Constitution, and I will advise everybody at HUD to follow the law and the Constitution.
Thank you. Thank you. I only have so much time. Let me move to Mr. Hughes. Affordable housing matters to Nevadans, and HUD is a reliable resource in my state. Our Nevada field office staff for HUD was very tiny. It was only about 4 people. Yet HUD has not filled one of those openings and actually let go one of those staffers. They actually let go the person who handles the sale of federal land for housing in my state. So my question to you, Mr. Hughes, is who is going to manage federal land sales for housing without experienced HUD employees in Nevada, and how do you intend to address this?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for the question. Secretary Turner, with regard to field offices, has been taking an inventory of all of our field offices around the country. So with regard to any type of permanent cuts, those are not definitive. He's still in conversations with the team and takes it very serious because he wants to execute the mission of HUD and to do it well.
This administration wants to move forward with federal land sales. How are you going to handle that?
We just, the secretary, just signed an MOU with Secretary Burgum. We've been putting a team together to look at how that's going to work out. We recently just had a meeting on it, and we look forward to working with you. I know.
Are there any specifics to how that's going to play out?
I know that they've identified some land, not all of it, but
Is that going to be made public anytime soon?
I can get back with you on that, Senator. I heard your remarks in the last hearing on housing affordability. I know that's important to you, and I'd love the opportunity, if confirmed, to work with you on that issue.
Thank you. Mr. Fogle, as Assistant Secretary for Global Markets, you'll be charged with overseeing over 170 commercial service offices in the United States and across the globe with the mission of promoting U.S. exports. I'm assuming you know this. America's top services export is travel and tourism. It is a billion-dollar industry in this country and my state. I am concerned right now with these blanket tariffs, the negative impact it is having on travel and tourism in this country. And as Assistant Secretary for Global Markets, what would you do to promote U.S. exports of travel and tourism and help us avoid the catastrophic economic impact we're seeing right now because of the president's blanket tariffs?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I've heard your comments in recent days about this. I understand the concern. And I'd be happy to work with you on this issue and learn more about it. I will say that, President Trump's policy with respect to economic growth, deregulation, is likely to lead to more opportunities for foreign investment into the United States. In fact, we've already seen a number of announcements.
How does that help tourism and travel?
Well, because I would think some of that foreign investment is going to make its way to your state of Nevada and lead to more opportunities for businesses to thrive, jobs to be created. Also, as the economy performs better, that's more likely to lead to tourism.
Let's talk about our tourism and travel industry in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I intend to.
I'm going to give you 15 seconds and we'll head on.
You got it, but you're already cutting into my time.
Well,
and I was just going to say,
out of time.
Mr. Fogle, thank you. I look forward to talking with you on this subject. Thank you.
Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hyde, I'm very concerned about reports that the China-controlled AI company DeepSeek accessed advanced NVIDIA chips through third countries despite stringent U.S. export controls aimed at limiting communist China's access to cutting-edge semiconductor technology. How did DeepSeek bypass U.S. export controls using supposed allies like Malaysia and Singapore?
Yeah, Senator, well, thank you for the question. It's a timely and important question, and just want to say congratulations on your new gig and excited to have someone like yourself who's so focused on China in this body. I would just say, as a general matter, there is no more sophisticated actor on the planet than the CCP as far as it goes to overt and covert collection of U.S. technology, right? And it is well known pattern and practice that they use a variety of intermediaries and third-party carve-outs in third countries to get their hands on U.S. technology that would be otherwise denied. Well, I can't speak specifically to this incident that you referenced in news report about Malaysia and the chips. I'll just say this is going to be a continuous battle every single day at BIS, and we're going to have to keep our eye on the prize on this because, again, China's an incredibly sophisticated actor. So we're going to be adjudicating that threat every single day.
Can you lay out a plan of what BIS can do to prevent that from happening again?
Yeah, I mean, a good example of one thing that would be really easy to accomplish relatively quickly is right now our export control laws, our restrictions don't match don't cover subsidiaries of companies, right? So if you put an entity on the entity list and it's got a subsidiary, the restriction you put on the entity list company doesn't apply to its own subsidiary, right? We've solved this in sanctions going back decades. We have it's called a 50+1 rule, where if you're a subsidiary of a sanctioned entities, you get whacked too. We don't have that for export controls. So all you have to do is say, oh, that's my Malaysian entity. You didn't put it on the entity list, so I'm allowed to import it. It's a simple fix you could do relatively quickly. These are the kind of things we're going to be talking about and moving very quickly at to solve the problem that you brought up.
I want to work with you on that. I appreciate
Absolutely.
that very much. Mr. Hughes, in 2016, the Obama administration declared that it is unlawful discrimination for realtors and landlords to discuss a neighborhood's crime rate with prospective renters or buyers. It seems ridiculous to me that we would try to hide that from someone who's trying to buy a home or rent an apartment. What do you and Secretary Turner plan to do with that ruling?
Senator, what was the rule?
The ruling determined that it's, quote, unlawful discrimination to discuss a neighborhood's crime rate.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that Secretary Turner and myself, now in my current capacity and if confirmed, are going to do everything we can to champion fair housing laws and enforce it through everything we can do at HUD and working with the Department of Justice. Sir.
In Secretary Turner's confirmation hearing, he agreed that that's outrageous.
Absolutely.
I assume that your reaction, you might not
Yes,
know
sir.
the ins and outs of the ruling, but you would agree that that's ridiculous. We should change it. I want to work with you.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Very good. Mr. Hurley, the People's Republic of China has built too many companies using stolen American technology. Communist China exploits America's cutting-edge research to acquire critical technologies that make China stronger and the United States weaker. Bad actors continually find ways to evade sanctions and launder funds. How do you plan to tighten enforcement to prevent sanctions evasion and impose stricter sanctions on companies with connections to China's military?
Well, thank you very much, sir, and I enjoyed our conversation about this topic this past week. Share Landon's sense of urgency on the threat that we're facing in terms of particularly a broad range of nefarious activities, but right at the core of it is sort of the crown jewels of our technology. And so in the same way he was describing, doing a better job on the export controls, one of the first priorities for me at TFI is to understand better how we can tighten the focus with precision munitions to get exactly at the sources of those the CPC entities that are involved in these activities.
Very good. One final question, Mr. Wohl. The federal government has been relying on religious organizations for years to deliver services through grants. But under the far left rules at HUD in the last administration, a faith-based soup kitchen or a homeless shelter would jeopardize their grant funding just simply by offering a prayer before a meal. Will you remove those barriers and work to protect faith-based organizations who do good things? And what can you do to roll back those rulings from the last administration?
Well, thank you, Senator. The Secretary's been very clear that he wants to make things easier for faith-based groups to do the outstanding work that they're doing. They are being cut out in certain instances because of certain conditions that are put into grant awards. We want to take a very hard look at all of that and see how we can make it. My understanding now is some of the faith-based groups won't even submit an application because they know they're not gonna be awarded the funds, and we need to change that messaging. We need to include them. They do outstanding work, and we want to encourage them to continue to do so.
I want to work with you on that as well. Thank you to all of you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Hurley, I wanted to just start with you. If you're confirmed, you oversee FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. In your opening statement, you said that part of the role that you'll have is disrupting and dismantling the financial networks that support terrorist groups, organized crime, including nations that threaten our national security. So right now we're having before this committee sort of bipartisan talks about cryptocurrency, stablecoin. I want to ask if you have concerns about North Korea, drug cartels, other types of organizations like that from utilizing cryptocurrencies and stablecoin.
Thanks very much, Senator, and also very much enjoyed our conversation. I absolutely share the concern on the use of crypto. I mean, obviously, our adversaries. Anytime we use any tool, they're as I described, they're fairly sophisticated, and they're going to find a way around it. And we can see obvious examples. The recent headline stories. I'm not in the building yet, so I haven't had a chance to dig deep in the intelligence. But it seems very clear that the DPRK was able to take well over $1 billion in crypto, and it sounds like they've successfully laundered it through the blockchain.
And look, as I talk to colleagues on the other side of the aisle, industry, I mean, people are recognizing this is a problem. Industry doesn't want this to be something that puts a stain upon their technology. One idea that came up is trying to get FinCEN to be able to take a bigger role here, in particular, when it comes to allowing illicit actors from being able to access mixers, other types of anonymization tools. Does that sound like a potential place where FinCEN can get engaged in?
Absolutely, Senator, and I, as we both understand very well, the blockchain is transparent. One friend of mine describes it as it's prosecution futures. With some basic network analysis, you can figure out the source of pretty much anything on the blockchain, and so it does make sense to me that the key for us is the off-ramps, and FinCEN's right at those off-ramps.
Well, you have that transparency until you have technologies like mixers that can add that anonymity that allows for, some of these types of illicit actors. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, but at the end of the day, there's still IP addresses. And so I think actually with good application of network analysis, at some point it leaves the blockchain. And exactly to your point, sir, us having the tools in place to catch it at the moment it's trying to get into our financial system and pollute it, or be used by weapons proliferators, by terrorists. I think that's the big opportunity for us.
So that's something you'll work with me on?
Absolutely.
Okay. Look, also you'd be overseeing OFAC, and a lot that we're trying to gather in terms of our ability to use sanctions and what role that plays. Right now, one place in particular I've been trying to get some greater sense of in terms of what comes next is with regards to Syria. So I wanted to ask you if you believe a sanctions regime, the framework that we have in place with respect to Syria should be updated to reflect the new political realities on the ground from the collapse of the Assad regime.
Well, I think the phrase that you use in our conversation is that we have a moment here in Syria and the Middle East broadly, and I completely agree. Hopefully we can get to the best possible outcome. I would say, again, I need to get in the building, get deeper in the intelligence. I have been able to have some conversations with friends at state and elsewhere who are deep into the topic, and I think the way in which we would take down sanctions, to the extent that we can influence the best possible outcome for the region and for our own safety and security, I think it's going to be a complicated process, and I hope we do it very carefully.
Yeah, I agree, and especially when there's still concerns about ISIS and terrorist groups, et cetera. And it's not just about the architecture of the sanctions, but also the enforcement side. So, for instance, what we've seen with regards to Russia, we're continuing to see PRC-associated entities helping Russia circumvent enforcement. What can we be doing better to try to improve that and try to prevent, the Russia from and other actors from evading U.S. sanctions?
Yes, sir. And the discussions that I've had with, and it's been great to get a chance to meet the folks across the silos of TFI. And I think certainly what I'm hearing as a consensus is that it doesn't matter what sanction you claim to have in place. It's the aggressiveness with which you follow up on the sanction.
Correct.
And I think of the example, the game whack-a-mole.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you do, there's going to be a counter response to it. My sense is we look at the difference between the huge success of the maximum pressure campaign on Iran, for instance, in Trump 1, and the leakiness of it that we've seen over the last 4 years. It's not so much the specific sanctions, it's the aggressiveness of the follow-up with our foreign partners, with the banks, and then just being very diligent about, all right, we reflag that tanker, we've got to do the next tanker, it's one step at a time. And obviously for the Russia oil sanctions, they're, not just adopting the same techniques, but sharing techniques.
And also drawing upon the expertise of the staff, and the civil servants, and others. So with that, I'll yield back to the chairman.
Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Kim. Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member, for holding this important hearing. I want to thank all the nominees here for your willingness to serve our great nation, and to your families for allowing you to do it, because we know that your families will sacrifice along with you as you work hard on behalf of our country. I want to continue the theme here that Senator Kim was talking about. Our nation's largest existential threat is Communist China and its malign influence. As the East Asia Subcommittee Chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I'm committed to finding ways to combat Communist China in any way we can. After Communist China took over in Hong Kong in 2020, Hong Kong shifted from a trusted global financial center to a critical tool in Communist China's belt to launder money and evade sanctions and carry out other illicit financial activities. For example, Hong Kong has been responsible for creating front companies to purchase barred Iranian oil and managing ghost ships that engage in illegal trade with North Korea. According to the Economic and Security Review Commission on China, exporters from Communist China and Hong Kong shipped 85% of the semiconductors imported by Russia between March 22 and September 23. In 2022 alone, Hong Kong ranked as Russia's second largest semiconductor import partner, shipping approximately $400 million worth of semiconductors during the first year of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Hong Kong has gone rogue, it's certainly different from what it used to be in the past, and is helping our adversaries circumvent U.S. sanctions and export controls. Mr. Hurley and Mr. Hyde, do you agree with this assessment of Hong Kong? Mr. Hurley, we'll start with you.
Yes, sir, I do.
Yes, Senator, I do.
So if confirmed, what tools will you prioritize to counter entities like Hong Kong that exploit loopholes or bypass U.S. export laws? Again, Mr. Hurley, we'll start with you.
Well, I think we talk about prioritizing tools. I'd step back for a second and say we got to be holistic about it. So Landon at Commerce has very important tools. Our colleagues at the State Department have very important tools. And then at Treasury, sort of the center, mostly through impact on the financial system and on specific entities as they touch our financial system. And so what I would say is the let's be holistic about it. Let's, to the extent we can enlist our allies to help us with it, it's always more effective to be able to counter these activities.
Yeah, Senator, I more or less agree exactly with what my colleague just said. And I would just say, at the end of the first Trump administration, he signed an executive order that basically said, Hong Kong, across all our legal authorities, Hong Kong will be considered part of the PRC, right? And then more or less, not to be softly critical of the last administration, more or less that went unaddressed for 4 years. A variety of shell companies were popping up in Hong Kong, purchasing semiconductors, shipping them to Russia, shipping them to entities on the mainland. And by and large, we were a little bit asleep on the wheel. So this is something that from day one, we're going to have to sort of hit the ground running on and adjudicate very heavily.
So your point there, Mr. Hyde, I think is also really good from the standpoint of getting back to what Mr. Hurley just said about, look, it's not just about what we use or what tools we have, it's how actively we pursue it. What kind of rigor do we actually pursue the sanctions to be able to make sure they're enforced and where we're cracking down and enforcing the rules? Would that, you both agree with that?
Yes, sir. And, I've spent my life as an investor, mostly a public market investor. And if you aren't learning if you're taking a hard look at what you tried and what did not work, you're not learning. And that'll be a big focus for me in this job.
Great. Well, switch gears a little bit. At the end of President Biden's term, the administration unleashed an avalanche of reckless rulemaking across various federal agencies. I look forward to working with all of you to roll back the harmful policies that were put in place by Biden bureaucrats. One of these rush midnight rules is the Department of Commerce Artificial Intelligence Diffusion Rule, which aims to regulate global diffusion of advanced AI chips and models. This misguided rule places arbitrary purchase limits and a cumbersome licensing process to acquire U.S. computing technologies in approximately 150 countries, including allies like Israel. Constrained from purchasing U.S. technology, these countries would be incentivized to turn to communist China's unregulated, cheap substitutes. Technology companies in these affected countries could be motivated to create their own AI technology stacks outside of our export controls regime. And while I certainly agree with the goals of what the administration previously was trying to do to limit China's ability to compete with us in AI, this policy was actually, I think, going to have unintended consequence of doing just the opposite. So with that, Mr. Hyde, I look forward to working with you and the Trump administration on alternatives to this rule that will be effective in preventing communist China from capturing the world market in a leading technology without compromising America's advantages. And with that, I say I'm over, so I'll give you back the time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Senator Reed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Mr. Hughes, we had an opportunity when you were in the office to talk about the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program, which supports energy-saving modification for affordable housing units. And it's based on bipartisan legislation Senator Collins and I introduced. We estimate that some of the savings are about $1,100 a year with the installation of these energy-saving devices. Press reports indicate that the program was canceled. I asked you in the office, as your current duty as Chief of Staff, was it canceled, and you responded it's under review. Can you fill us in on the latest details?
Yes, sir, and thank you for your time in your office. I enjoyed speaking with you. We are currently looking into that. I was informed. It's currently under litigation, so I can't speak about that right now, but I do look forward to getting back to you very soon and continuing the conversation we had on that topic.
A following question. Rhode Island was awarded $11.8 million in GRRP loans and grants, and when will this money be available to my constituents?
Say that again, sir.
I said Rhode Island has been awarded $11.8 million under this program. When will that money be
yes, sir.
issued?
Thank you for that, and thank you for the letter that you sent the Secretary. We've been working on a response, and we hope to get back to you very soon with an answer on that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would, for the record, like to introduce a article which talks about the positive effect of this program.
Without objection.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Ms. Bowman, in a speech in March 2024, you said that, quote, in the execution of its bank regulatory and supervisory responsibilities, the board is meant to operate independently and apolitically. Can you affirm, yes or no, whether you still think that is an accurate statement?
Yes, I believe that's an accurate statement.
Thank you very much. Well, I ask this because both the OMB and Treasury seem to have a concerted effort to involve themselves in Fed affairs. In February, the White House issued an executive order saying that independent agency officials like you must be supervised and controlled by the president. And just yesterday, Secretary Bessent of the Treasury Department said the Treasury Department plans to revisit prudential regulation, and it intends to drive more tailored regulation. Mm-hmm. Will the Fed remain independent on supervision and regulation?
Senator, that's a question that I focus on often, which is that we should be applying similar requirements across the prudential regulators and holding banks to standards that are transparent and clear. So to the extent that we can work together with our other regulators, and I think that's an important and appropriate focus and goal that we could accomplish.
Do you plan to submit your regulations to OMB for review and provide the Treasury Department with a say in the substance of those rules?
I think it's important that we understand the requirements that we're asking the banking industry and the financial industry to comply with. So it's important that we're being consistent across, especially my counterparts in the other regulatory bodies, that our expectations are similar.
But submitting rules for review by the OMB would be contrary to the previous practice of the Federal Reserve. Is that correct?
Well, as I said earlier, I think it's important that we adhere to the principles of cost-benefit analysis, that we're identifying the problem that we're trying to solve, and that I think that will be a part of the process that will be
You
beneficial.
have, I presume, over the last several decades, been in the Fed, adhering to the rule of cost-benefit analysis, consistent with the law, et cetera. Are you suggesting the Fed has been sort of frivolous over the last years?
So actually, the Fed is not required to apply cost-benefit analysis in our regulatory duties. And I think that is a very important part of the regulatory process. And if I'm confirmed, I intend to strictly comply with cost-benefit analysis.
Is DOGE required to comply with cost-benefit analysis?
I'm not familiar with the mission of DOGE.
Very few people are. They seem to be wandering around. But I can tell you, I've never seen any of their responses contain cost-benefit analysis, as they wipe out people from offices who they have to recall 2 or 3 days later because we have a critical safety issue with our nuclear weapons. So I would urge you to think hard about whether you're going to submit regulations to Treasury or to OMB. Thank you.
Senator, thank you for that question.
Thank you, Senator Reed. We'll turn to Senator Haggerty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take just a moment to say a few words about a good friend of mine, John Hurley. I've known John for nearly a decade, and in that time I've come to know him as a friend and someone that I hold in the highest regard. John's tremendous success in the private sector is matched only by his love of this country. His sense of duty and his desire to keep it safe and see it prosper are amazing. As a young man, John served in the Army in the first Gulf War and was awarded a Bronze Star. He's continued to serve throughout his life, and most recently, he was a member of the President Trump's Intelligence Advisory Board during President Trump's first term. Over the years, John has been a great resource and partner in thinking through a number of policy issues, and I've always appreciated his perspective and his understanding of both economic and national security issues. John's deep knowledge and his expertise in these domains is exactly what our country needs in an age of escalating competition and geopolitical tension. During the Trump administration's first term, sanctions and other levers of economic statecraft became more than just symbolic options. They became vital tools for deterring crime, for protecting Americans, and for advancing our nation's national security. Now, at this moment, we're at a pivotal time for our nation. We need strong leaders who understand our financial system in order to support U.S. national security and help us achieve our foreign policy objectives. John will be pivotal in advancing U.S. national security and protecting our financial system from abuse by bad actors. I look forward to voting for John's confirmation, and I encourage all of my colleagues to do the same. Governor Bowman, I'd like to turn to you, if I could. In the role of Vice Chairman of Supervision, you're going to be tasked with overseeing our largest financial institutions and, of course, assessing possible threats. I'd like to hear from you what you think the greatest threats are to our financial system at this point.
Well, Senator, thank you for that question, and thank you for the opportunity to visit with you about some of the issues that are important to you earlier this week. As we're looking at some of the things that will be affecting our financial system, I think it's important that we understand and have expectations that our banks are held to accountable standards and that they're transparent.
Well, the stability of our banking system, I think, is more critical now than ever. And I think a stable hand like yours in a supervisory role is going to be absolutely critical. I welcome your confirmation as well. I look forward to voting for you, and I encourage all my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Haggerty. We'll turn to Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hughes, welcome and congratulations on your nomination. Has President Trump promised to lower housing costs?
Hi, Senator. Good to see you. It was very good to come into your office and speak with your staff. They were kind enough to give me some Georgia peanuts, so appreciate that. Yes, sir, the president has.
And now people are looking to the housing agency to make it happen. I can tell you that housing affordability is a major problem in Georgia. You've served as chief of staff to both Secretary Turner and former Secretary Carson, and now you're nominated for the #2 position at the agency. That's a whole lot of opportunity to lower costs, to carry out the president's stated objective to lower the cost of housing. But since you've been chief of staff, HUD is focused on cutting staff to deliver disaster recovery resources to states like mine, slammed by deadly hurricanes. Could you tell me, how does that lower costs for Georgians?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I know, I'm assuming what you're referencing is some of the cuts in CPD related.
How does cutting staff who deliver disaster recovery resources lower housing costs for Georgians? That's the question.
Yes, sir. And my response is, I think what you're referring to is the stuff in the media about the 82% cuts or something. What I can tell you is that
how does it lower costs?
Secretary Turner, as soon as he came into HUD, he made it very clear that he is in charge of the agency. The DOGE team.
Sir, you're stating the obvious, and you're #2. I'm asking you, how does this lower costs? Can you answer that question?
So what I was getting at is those conversations with DOGE are deliberative and nothing is final right now. I can tell you that with reference to the disaster recovery question, the secretary, and if confirmed, I will also make sure that program office and the rest of the agency runs as efficiently and effectively as possible.
All right. Sounds like you don't have an answer to my actual question. HUD has also canceled grants that support housing construction for Georgians with disabilities. How does that lower costs for Georgians?
So what grant are you referring to?
The grants that support housing construction for Georgians with disabilities. You're nominated to be #2 at that agency. You are familiar with that program.
There's a number of grants. There's several at HUD. I just want to know
how does canceling grants for people with disabilities lower costs for Georgians?
Sir, we want to help individuals with disability. I just want to know which grant you were referring to so I could appropriately answer your question.
HUD has also weakened enforcement of our bedrock fair housing laws established as a result of the civil rights movement. How does that lower housing costs for Georgians? Why should Georgians feel better who are concerned about the affordability of housing? So I've asked you about folks with disabilities. I'm asking you now about folks who are dealing with the issue of fair housing, who face discrimination. And I'm asking you, how do you help them by weakening enforcement? Does that lower their costs or raise their costs? What do you think?
Senator, thank you for the question. At HUD under Secretary Carson, we tried to champion fair housing and enforce the law. We did that. There were a number of cases that he brought forth. One was against Facebook. There was another domestic violence case and numerous other ones. And Secretary Turner, as soon as he got confirmed, sir, made it very clear to the team that he wants to be a champion and uphold the law for fair housing rights.
Actually, we've seen grants terminated in HUD in response to the president's DEI order. You've weakened enforcement. Is that correct?
Sir, no. We're gonna follow the law at HUD, and Secretary Turner's.
Well, I've heard that over and over again, but they are weakening our ability to make sure that people are in compliance with respect to fair housing.
So
this is a very serious question because I'm from a state where ordinary folks are just struggling, and we need to solve the housing problem.
Yes, sir.
And I would encourage you to refocus your efforts and the efforts of the agency on making sure that we make housing affordable for ordinary Georgians. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir. And I had a great conversation with your staff. I appreciate their time, and if confirmed, I look forward to working with you, sir.
Thank you.
Senator McCormick, are you prepared to go, or do you want to wait 5 minutes? Huh. I'll take that out of your 5 minutes. Senator Warnock, you know the answer to that question. Oh, that's 3 minutes. So hopefully this colloquy is helping you out, Senator
All right.
McCormick.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, for our nominees here. Great to see you all. Thank you for your willingness to serve, and congratulations to your family and your nominations. Governor Bowman, I'd like to begin with a question on the U.S. fiscal condition. At the end of FY24, our debt to GDP ratio was 98%. According to the Treasury, that ratio is expected to climb to about 130% over the next 10 years, surpassing our historical high of 106% in the wake of World War II. And so from the vantage point of you being on the FOMC, how worried are you about the national debt in the context of the Treasury markets in particular?
Well, let me start by saying the fiscal responsibility for fiscal matters is that of the Congress and the administration, so I wouldn't want to overstep and criticize the work that you're doing here. But we do recognize, as we're considering the state of the economy, that we're running a budget deficit while we're experiencing a time of full employment. But as we review the state of the economy, it's important that we recognize that the fiscal path currently is unsustainable. The debt is growing much faster than our growth.
Thank you. Mr. Hurley, good to see you. At the Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, I had a chance earlier in my career to work hand-to-hand with that role. It's a very important role. You're going to face the enormous task of protecting America from bad actors using our financial system in every corner of the world. Now, President Trump campaigned on stopping the flow of fentanyl into the United States. It's a top priority. Could you discuss, just at a high level, the elements of the fentanyl supply chain that rely on the U.S. financial system to move money globally, particularly in Mexico and China?
Thanks very much, Senator, and very much enjoyed our conversation and hearing your times at Treasury. So as it's mentioned to your colleagues, not in the building yet. I've been just getting briefings the last several weeks and been extraordinarily impressed by the folks who will be working with me in TFI. I would say my first impression is that the questions weren't being asked on this area. That maybe more broadly, there just has been less focus on the border, and because fentanyl is so associated with the border, I don't know that that we've been asking the questions we could ask. I will say though that with every question I've asked, my sense is enormous enthusiasm to tackle this problem. And the combination of tools that TFI can bring together from the national security side through then through FinCEN and then with our law enforcement partners, I'm very excited about how we can really make an impact on this. And to your point, we've all seen the stories in the press about the money laundering cycles involving the CPC, potentially involving not just our neighbors to the south, maybe our neighbors to the north, and that'll be a priority for me.
Very good. And I hope, assuming you're confirmed, that we could talk further about this, because I do think squeezing the financial system in terms of, it's tens of billions of dollars of fentanyl funding that's going throughout our financial system. I think there's an opportunity there to bring your team to bear if you're confirmed.
I completely agree, sir. I look forward to that.
Mr. Fogle, good to see you again, too. Thank you for being here. If confirmed, you'll be tasked with supporting the American exporter. A major priority of this administration is to create a fair and level playing field for U.S. businesses. So could you outline the ways that an American business looking to export goods overseas is currently at a competitive disadvantage against their competitors in China? And how, in your mind, can we counteract that?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Senator. Good to see you. One of the biggest problems with international trade, and the President's been very clear on this, are actually
not only tariffs, but non-tariff barriers. They're very insidious. They're often hard to identify. They can be regulatory in nature and other requirements that countries impose. And the president has prioritized bringing those down. He's been very clear about that. And so, fortunately, Global Markets, the division I've been fortunate enough to be asked to head, that's their probably number one priority, is tackling these barriers. And of course, China is our number one threat, existential threat. They're not a trusted actor, they're a bad actor. And so they often are violating these rules and finding ways around them, and we're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, thank you. And I just reinforce your point that the cost of capital and the degree to which those Chinese companies are benefited from unfair capital practices relative to U.S. businesses is part of, as you say, the non-tariff barriers, the non-tariff benefits that Chinese exporters have vis-a-vis United States companies. So thank you for your vigilance on that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Gallego.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fogle, just continuing on manufacturing, specifically Arizona manufacturing. Trump's on and off again roller coaster is causing total chaos in Arizona. Unlike past, Arizona is not just a sunshine state for retirement. Now we produce very sophisticated chips for export, electric vehicles for export, batteries, and more to global markets all over the world. But across the state, I'm hearing from factories now that are pausing their expansion, which means less jobs for Arizona because of this the chaos. So they have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring. And I mean, this is clearly just not a way you should run a country. So Trump promised to bring manufacturing back, something that I would love to see. But right now, I'm seeing the exact opposite. So do you think that the way the president is conducting about creating and implementing these trade policies is really the best way to promote manufacturing and open opportunities abroad for our exporters, specifically for Arizona too?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I do support what the president is doing. I think he's been very clear. I also want to distinguish between short-term and medium and long-term implications. So, the president's been very clear that the past paradigm is no longer going to work. Foreign countries need to bring down their barriers, tariffs and non-tariff barriers. That's going to create opportunities for exporters, including in Arizona. That will take time. That's where I'm distinguishing between the immediate term. You're going to see more jobs in Arizona as a result of more exporting. Also, in terms of manufacturing, his policies, he's been very clear, it's a priority to reindustrialize the United States. We already see with TSMC coming to Arizona, that's a very large project. Again, the president has been prioritizing this. Also, I will mention his deregulatory agenda, pro-growth agenda also will lead to more jobs, more opportunities for exporters and others.
Well, certainly there's a lot happening, but clarity is not what I'm sensing from the business community in Arizona, especially over the actions of the last couple of days. Madam Chair, I also would ask for unanimous consent to enter this letter into the record that I sent this morning with Senator Schiff to the White House and Office of Government Ethics, demanding an investigation into the potential insider trading and corruption ahead of Trump's tariff pause that happened yesterday.
Without objection.
Thank you. I look forward to getting answers. Trump laid it out very plainly. He told people to buy right before announcing the tariff suspension. So I want to know what he and his people and his friends, his insider friends, were doing before and then and in between that they were able to grossly profit off this corruption that's affecting Main Street and the economy. And specifically, what did he tell people in the White House? So I hope our letter gets to the bottom of this. Moving on, there was an earlier conversation Mr. Hughes, regarding the creation of a joint task force when it comes to Interior and HUD to find more available land, right? And something that actually I'd love to see we could work on together. As you know, or I don't know if you're aware, at least Arizona is still in a very strong housing crunch. 65% of our land is federal land. A lot of beautiful land we want to make sure that we preserve for our generations to go hiking, hunting, fishing, just to have general viewscapes. But I'm sure that there are some lands that are not in that category. Some that also, of course, aren't tribally sensitive to tribal cultures that I think we could work with, especially with our local municipalities that want to see more high-density housing on the perimeters of their cities. So one of the things I was hoping to make sure, at least if you, when you engage with the task force, is that you're engaging with our affected communities, our tribal specifically, and rural areas, and will there be comments, public comment periods for this? And will they have a community, will the communities have a say in it? What we don't want to see happen is just like a wholesale, in the dark sale of this land without us having any opportunity to have some input. And I think you'll have some willing ears in Arizona if we have some good community engagement.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I know we haven't had time to meet personally yet, but I look forward to soon. And yes, sir, I will absolutely look into that and would love to work with you on that issue.
And just in terms of transparency, I mean, that's the thing that we want to highlight. You're dealing in communities that have largely been left behind, that actually haven't seen any type of public process in the past, largely because nothing's been happening there. So a very transparent process about what's going to be potentially developed, sold, is going to be extremely important to build trust in these communities too.
Absolutely, yes, sir, Senator. And I would love that opportunity to work with you on that issue.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
The ranking member has asked that I next recognize Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Senator Smith. It looks like I've got the gavel here. Okay. Anyway, welcome everybody, and congratulations on your nominations. There's been, understandably, a lot of talk about the tariffs. President Trump's tariffs have sent our economy into chaos. You can just see that by the gyrations in the stock market. I hear from a lot of small businesses in Maryland that are very worried that the tariffs are going to put them out of business in some cases, or require them to lay off people, and if not our tariffs on foreign goods, retaliatory tariffs. But I wanted to speak a little bit about another component of this, because it was very curious that while the tariffs were originally placed on uninhabited islands around the world, they were not placed on Russia. And it was interesting because the tariffs were placed on Ukraine, but not on Russia. And that comes at a time when it seems Vladimir Putin is playing President Trump like a fiddle to me, after we witnessed President Trump throw President Zelensky under the bus at the White House. President Zelensky subsequently agreed to a ceasefire. Putin has refused to agree to a ceasefire. He's stringing the president out. So I want to talk about some of the tools that we use when it comes to exercising our foreign policy. Mr. Hurley, you'll be in charge of sanctions implementation, if confirmed, over at the Treasury Department. And the fact that the president put sanctions on our Ukrainian partners and not on Russia was curious to me. So I do want to ask you about the oil price cap, which is in place. That was put in place by the United States and many of our European partners and other allies around the world. Obviously, we need to work to make sure it's as effective as possible. But my question to you is, do you support continuing to apply the oil price cap?
Well, thank you very much, Senator. I very much appreciate the question, and I would mention that the plight of what the suffering that's going on in Ukraine right now is very near and dear to me, given that my late wife, her grandfather, was from Ukraine, and fought in World War II. Actually on the Soviet side on the way back, but just so difficult, and I think we're all feeling terrible about the suffering that's happened these last several years. I think, in terms of sanctions on Russia, my job at TFI is to provide the Secretary and the President tools. And so as he and Secretary Rubio decide the way forward in Ukraine, I think we all support the idea of ending the suffering, ending the conflict. And so if the direction is to tighten the sanctions and to inflict more higher cost, we'll do that for them. And if the direction is the other direction, which is more carrots to try to get us to a peaceful result, that'll be our job.
Well, first of all, let me say I agree with you entirely. We need to end the suffering. Thank you for your own prior service in our military. And your predecessors saw their jobs not simply as implementation, although that's obviously part of it, but also as a policy position. I mean, as an undersecretary position and providing advice. So I'm going to ask my question to you again. Do you agree that we should maintain the oil price cap on Russian oil?
So I'd just say, generally, sir, I completely agree that my job is to, implement.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. You know, we only have 5 minutes. That was a pretty direct question. Let me ask you this.
Specific mechanism, sir. Until I'm in the building, deeper understand the intelligence, really understand the logic behind the price cap, I'm a little reluctant to give you a blanket say that this is the right tool.
Sure.
But certainly I want to use the right tools to bring peace there and to support the president.
It has been a good tool. It's obviously not a perfect tool. There are no perfect tools. You need a lot of tools in the toolkit.
Yes, sir.
Which is why I was so curious the president decided not to impose any tariffs on Russia. We don't have a huge amount of trade with Russia, but we have a trade deficit with Russia, and that seems to be something the president's very focused on. Maybe after, if you're confirmed, you can tell me why he left off Russia and hit Ukraine.
Yes, sir.
But on the sanctions, the reason on the oil price cap, I'm asking because there has been some talk in the press, you may be aware of it, that the Trump administration may decide to abandon the oil price cap. And in my view, it would make zero sense to abandon the oil price cap or any sanctions until and unless we actually have a peace agreement between Ukraine. You would agree that it does not make sense to relieve pressure on Russia until we've achieved our goals with respect to Russia. Would you agree with that?
Well, sir, I would say I'm thinking about the broad range of tools available to the president in this case. For sure, if President Putin is resisting, I would expect the president to look to me and to the rest of the interagency to apply more pressure. And to the extent that we're heading in a better direction, they'll look to us to potentially relieve pressure. And I think you mentioned my son's a lieutenant in Germany, sir, and so we stand ready to provide the president with whatever tool he needs.
Right. Well, the oil price cap was put in place, as you know, because of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So I do have a very simple question. You do agree that Russia and Putin are the aggressors in this war, do you not?
Sir, I believe the cause of the war in Ukraine was a failure of deterrence. And it seems that we had adequate deterrence when President Trump was president his first term.
Let me just, again, this is a pretty simple question.
Yes, sir.
Right? And it's why we and our allies are trying to punish Russia for its actions, whether it's through the oil price cap or other means, because at least until recently, the United States and our allies recognized that Russia was the aggressor. So just a very simple question. Do you agree that Putin and Russia are the aggressors in the war in Ukraine? Did they start the war?
So I believe that military conflict started with the Russian two invasions into Ukraine, beginning with Crimea. But I believe the question of aggressor, sir, is more complicated than that. And I would certainly say that go back to 2012, certainly.
You do not agree that Russia was the aggressor. You don't agree that Russia started the war in Ukraine.
Sir, I'd say what started the war in Ukraine was a failure of effective deterrence.
Mr. Chairman, look, it was a yes or no question.
I'll just say that
the question is
2 minutes over, so let's make this your last one.
So you don't want to give a yes or no answer to that. Is that correct?
Sir, I believe in peace through strength, and we failed to have adequate strength.
Yeah, and okay. I take that as you don't want to answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Certainly. Remind me not to vote. Okay. Governor Bowman, thank you for being here. Your predecessor, Vice Chair Barr, sat before this committee several times since the failure of SVB and never actually answered the question that I think is really important. Why was there no accountability at the Federal Reserve? We saw the second, third, and fourth largest bank failures, and till this day, I'm not sure we even know what really happened. Additionally, it is my understanding that no staff from the Federal Reserve or the San Francisco Fed were fired, suspended, or faced any real consequences. Do you believe that there was appropriate accountability for the failures?
Well, thank you, sir, for that question. I think it's an important issue and matter that we need to fully understand what happened in the run-up to and in the aftermath of the failure of Silicon Valley Bank. I would like to see an ability to understand how we could improve supervision going forward, and one of those ways that we can do from the record of Silicon Valley Bank and our supervision going up to it is to ensure that we're focusing on the core material financial risks that affect a bank's condition.
Let me ask it in a different way.
Sure.
Will you commit to fully investigating the supervisory, because there's no doubt there were supervisory failures. This is a really easy one from my perspective, and holding those accountable is our responsibility.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Speaking of the failure of Silicon Valley Bank, some have sought to blame S-2155, the Dodd-Frank Reform Act that we passed in a bipartisan fashion. They blamed the requiring tailoring of regulation, not deregulation, as a cause. However, it has been widely acknowledged that the main cause of SVB was interest rate risk. It appears that this bread and butter banking issue was missed by regulators in their supervision of the SVB. In fact, it seems that regulators were more focused on some called climate risk and were completely caught off guard by the interest rate risk. Former Vice Chair Barr testified that he was not aware of possible interest rate risk until mid-February of 2023, just weeks before the failure. In your role as chair of the board subcommittee on smaller regional and community banking, did you evaluate potential interest rate risks before February? Do you think the board could have done more to prevent SVB?
Yes, Senator, that's an excellent question, and I'd like to give you my perspective on as we were increasing interest rates in a dramatic fashion through the FOMC, it was important to me to understand what the impacts would be on our smaller bank portfolios. That was the $50 billion and below that I was responsible for in that subcommittee. We began shocking the portfolios of all of the state member banks within the Federal Reserve System and underneath our supervision up to 6%, so that we would understand what the impacts and implications of the increases in rates might be on those smaller institutions. We engaged in a number of conversations with state bank commissioners, with the banks themselves, with ABA and ICBA and their members as we were leading up to higher interest rates going forward. I also participated in a number of Fed Ask the Fed events where we talked about how we would be thinking about supervising the interest rate risk in these portfolios. And I also wrote an article that was published in the Community Banking Connections that was published in January of 2023.
I think it is safe to say that you took the interest rate risk seriously in your job on that subcommittee. Mr. Hughes, in my opening statement, I alluded to your operational experience at HUD, having served as chief of staff for 2 HUD secretaries. What lessons or insights did you learn as chief of staff that will enable you to be efficient and effective as deputy secretary at HUD?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and good to see you again. I know the secretary is looking forward to seeing you in your home state this weekend. My time under Secretary Carson and now at Secretary Turner, just overall, both of them are great public servants. And one of the things that I learned under Dr. Carson's leadership is to look at every issue, make sure that every point on a decision is given to him so they can make a good decision on the particular policy matter. Always listen to people and look at things with a compassionate lens. And that's something that, spending almost 10 years with Dr. Carson, that I learned. And then also putting the best people around the secretary. I was very passionate about personnel, and if you look at the last HUD team at the department, it was a really great group of people, and many of them have returned.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Senator Blunt, Rochester.
Thank you, Chairman Scott and Ranking Member Warren, and to the nominees and your families. In the last nomination hearing, I noted that it was unfortunate that we had so little time for some very important and consequential nominees. This one is even more jam-packed than that one, and it's ranging from housing to financial regulation to foreign intelligence. And I really just want to say I feel it's kind of a disservice to the American people and also to the nominees, and so that they're seriously considered. I'm going to be submitting questions for the record because I can't get to all of you in 4 or 5 minutes. But I want to focus today on Mr. Hughes. Thank you for meeting with me in my office. I appreciated the opportunity to talk about housing policy and how it is one of my top priorities. It's one of the top priorities of my constituents. And I recently introduced, I'm proud to say, my first piece of legislation that I've led as a U.S. Senator, and it was on housing. It's a bipartisan piece of legislation called the Housing Supply Frameworks Act with Senators Crapo, Fetterman, and Tillis. The bill directs HUD to develop frameworks for best practices on zoning and land use policies and is endorsed by more than 140 housing, governmental, and economic development groups. Do you believe that the federal government, Mr. Hughes, can play a role in providing best practices to localities to promote housing production and cut red tape?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and I appreciated our time in your office. I know we talked about our former CFO and the accomplishments we got done at HUD when the IG submitted the 13 material weaknesses and how we eliminated that in just a year and a half, and how we want to continue those efforts in this administration. But to answer your question, yes, the federal government can play an important role, and would love to work with you on I know what the legislation that you've proposed. I'd love to look at that and have a good discussion with you.
The original, it's interesting, the initial framework for zoning, the Standard Zoning Enabling Act, was actually passed in the 1920s. Things have changed a lot since the 1920s, and again, I look forward to working with my colleagues to get the Housing Supply Frameworks Act over the finish line and to address this housing crisis that we are all experiencing and really meet this moment. I would say by providing states and localities with a menu of options, communities who are ready to increase the housing supply will be empowered to reform their land use regulations. Mr. Hughes, I want to shift gears a little bit. When we met in my office, we spoke about our experiences as deputies. I was Deputy Secretary of Health and Social Services in Delaware, and we recognized the fact that a major part of this role, you said you were passionate about the workforce, and a major part is workforce planning. You've already been in a leadership role at HUD before and now, correct?
Yes, Senator.
And when Senator Cortez Masto asked about the potential closure of HUD field offices, you said the Secretary is taking inventory. What are the elements of that inventory? Does HUD plan to close field offices?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So we've been meeting with a number of non-career staff and also career staff, seeing what offices throughout the country are being impactful, and like I said, truly taking an inventory to look at how best we can serve the people that HUD represents.
What constitutes impactful for you? What are you looking at to decide whether to close offices or not?
Historically, since the field offices have been in place, most of the time those offices were put out, in the FPM office that you're referring to were there to really promote secretarial priorities. And then throughout the decades, they've also become a place where people in states and regions can reach out to get information for important issues relevant to their areas. So looking at that and then also looking ways we can maximize or in some cases even make them better is what we've been currently doing.
So I know I'm running out of time, but we'd still like to get the elements of what that means. The Housing and Community Development Act requires HUD to maintain an office in every state. Closing the Wilmington field office without a waiver would be breaking the law. I think all of us as members who have constituents would like to know what are the elements, and will you come back to Congress for a waiver should you decide to do that?
Senator, I'll always follow what the committee says, but I can just assure you that Secretary Turner is a very good man. He's a servant leader. And he will follow the law, and I will follow the law. I can promise you that.
I have run out of time, so I will yield back, and I will submit questions for the record for the other nominees. Thank you,
Senator.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your giving me this extra time so I can have a second round of questions. It's very generous. I want to respond first to a comment made by my colleague from North Carolina. Governor Bowman, this is just a yes or no question. At the onset of COVID, when markets were volatile, like we saw them last week, did Vice Chair Quarles initiate an emergency stress test or a so-called scenario analysis to understand whether or not the banks would be resilient to that shock?
Senator Warren, that
It's
was
just yes or no.
That was a very unique time in our.
It's
in
a
our
yes
economy.
or no. Did he?
Yes, he did.
Thank you. We really, I don't want to get in this tangle again, but people reasonably can ask why you are not willing to do this now and whether you're just worried about embarrassing President Trump, because this shock is one, unlike a virus, that is self-inflicted by the President of the United States. So I have a question for Mr. Fogle. Who would be responsible? He would be responsible for opening markets abroad for U.S. businesses. The President has made that job harder with the chaos of his on-again, off-again, on-again, off-again tariffs. The chairman of the Federal Reserve has said that costs are likely to rise, that unemployment is likely to go up. Some businesses are already handing out pink slips. Retirement accounts have taken a hit. Economists say if we continue down this road, a recession is inevitable. Mr. Fogle, do you agree that each of those outcomes is bad for American businesses?
Senator, first of all, I'm not an economist, and it's hard for me to.
Does that make it
address
hard to know whether or not
Well-
costs going up for families is a problem?
Well, but respectfully, I think he has been clear about his policies, and I think they're.
So the costs that have been identified by the chairman of the Federal Reserve, by economists, by things we can see with our own eyes, do you think those things are good things or bad things?
Again, Senator, I'm optimistic about the results.
Yeah,
of the
I know.
president's policies.
In the world you all live in, optimism seems to be the whole reality here. Let me just ask one other question, and that is a question about housing. This is one specific area where President Trump's red light, green light tariff chaos is really going to hit families. We currently have a housing shortage of about 5 million homes. This has raised housing costs and pushed homeownership out of reach for way too many families. President Trump's tariff war is making the problem even worse. For example, about 7% of goods that go into building a new home in the United States are imported, with China being the largest supplier of building materials by far. Things like appliances, lighting fixtures, power tools that construction workers use. Mr. Hughes, as you may know, President Trump just raised the tariffs on the goods we import from China to 145%. Do you think this is going to make it more expensive for home builders to build new homes?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and thank you for having me to your office yesterday. I really enjoyed our time. To answer your question, I'm not an economist, but I do believe in the president's vision and strategy for our country, and I think over time it's gonna be great.
Okay, that's not my question. If those costs go up, will it raise the price of housing for new home construction?
I think, Senator, to look at the whole issue, we've had millions of people come into this country over the last 4 years, about 10 million. We've had
Okay, I take it
increase
you're
in
not going to answer
regulations.
this question. This is a whole panel of
we've had-
people who want to do the dodge and weave. Well, let me give you an answer to this one. Last night, the CEO of the National Association of Home Builders said, quote, "We're anticipating higher material prices, which are either going to be absorbed by the builder or more likely they're going to be passed along to the consumer in the form of higher prices in the cost of that home. How much more will families have to pay for a new mid-sized home thanks to President Trump's tariffs? According to the National Association of Home Builders last night, between $7,500 and $10,000. Let me just say that again. President Trump's tariffs are raising the cost of a new home by $7,500 to $10,000, and that may just be the lower bound because President Trump's tariffs are also putting pressure on interest rate, which will make it more expensive to build and more expensive to get a mortgage. President Trump is making it personally impossible for more Americans to own a home. We're not going to have a chance to lower costs if Trump keeps up this tariff chaos. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the extra time.
I'll go ahead and dive into an unprepared 5 minutes of questions myself. Let me first start by saying to Robert Baldwin, who's been a part of our team here for a couple of years, thank you for your service to our country. You have not only served us on the Bank Committee, you also served us as a part of the national security team as well. Your service to this nation is a blessing to all of us. We don't always know what you do and how you do it, but we are thankful that you did it. And we'll miss you, and I look forward to staying in touch with you and seeing your career continue. I think the ranking member has brought up some interesting points that I want to dive into a little bit and then go beyond that. But before I get there, Mr. Fogle, the Commerce Department plays a central role in helping American businesses compete overseas. What role should ITA and the U.S. Commercial Service play in competing specifically against China?
Sure. Well, that is the number one issue. From an economic and national security issue, that's the China threat. I had the honor of serving in the last Trump administration where that was one of my number one priorities as well on the economic front. So, look, one of the things that we could do better is more interagency coordination, leveraging the capabilities of agencies like the Export-Import Bank, the DFC. There are certain capabilities they have to fight China that aren't being fully leveraged. China, XM, for example, has a financing program of authorization, $27 billion authorized by Congress, and only a couple billion of that has been used. So there's plenty of room there. Also, I'll just note the professional staff of global markets. They're the tip of the spear. They're in country throughout the world, and they're the ones on the ground who would be able to identify the China threat early and allow us to be efficient in competing with China.
Thank you. Just yesterday, we saw the president pause tariffs on 75 countries who came to the table to negotiate with the administration. This is an encouraging sign, and I look forward to seeing how much more the president can accomplish with a fully staffed team around him, including the nominees before us today. Mr. Fogle, I'd like to ask you another question as it relates to the possible negotiations that will produce fruit without any question. More jobs are better.
Yeah.
So high-paying manufacturing jobs
Yes.
coming to America is probably a really good thing.
It is.
Costs going up is probably a bad thing.
Correct.
So seeing eggs go down by 30% in the last 81 days is probably a good thing.
Correct.
Under the Biden administration, gas prices spiked to records that we are not comfortable with. Bad.
That's bad, yes.
Last 81 days, prices have come down. Good.
That's good.
Okay. Inflation hit 9% in July 2021. Bad.
Correct.
Inflation's down to 2.23% or so. Good.
Good.
Housing prices spiked and interest rates went to 7-point-some-odd% under the Biden administration. During the first Trump administration, We mostly saw mortgages around 3%. I'd rather have a 3% mortgage than not a 7% mortgage.
Right.
You too?
Yes.
Okay. Y'all, we could have everybody participate, but I'm going to just stick with Mr. Fogle since he seems so prepared for this line of questions that I have here. If we were to see a return to inflation, interest rates for homes continue to drop as we have already seen, that's probably good for the first-time home buyer.
Correct, Senator.
I'd like to hope that if we've seen this much progress in 81 days, that the next 81 days, if it's like the first 81 days, most Americans in most places will breathe a sigh of relief. Likely?
Likely, yes.
Yes, sir. Not guaranteed, but I'm pretty sure it's good. Now, there has been some consternation around the tariffs, and I think, frankly, makes sense to me. Question I have is, if in fact we are going to have a resetting of the global economy back towards American dominance, the net effect could be incredibly positive.
Yes, I fully agree.
I've asked my questions too quickly. I have 20 seconds. I'll yield back that time and go to Senator Alsobrooks.
Thank you so much, Chair Scott, Ranking Member Warren. Thank you for hosting today's hearing, and I want to say congratulations to all of the nominees, and thank you also for your willingness to serve. I have a few quick questions. First, for Mr. Hughes and Mr. Wohl. As Deputy Secretary and General Counsel of HUD, respectively, you will oversee the day-to-day management of an organization responsible for lowering housing costs. And so I want to understand how you will treat the federal workers who will be responsible for carrying out this work, many of whom you know are my constituents. So as a judge ruled in late March that the administration broke the law by firing probationary workers from many agencies, and following this ruling, a federal judge in Maryland issued a ruling requiring affected employees to be reinstated at several agencies, including HUD. On March 17th, HUD reinstated over 300 fired probationary employees. They told them that they would be reinstated, but that they should cancel all of their unemployment claims because they would receive back pay and benefits. However, on March 24th, these same employees received a second email from HUD stating that HUD would not provide employees with back pay for the time that they were illegally out of work. HUD also denied their continuation of traditional health insurance coverage. So, Mr. Hughes and Mr. Wohl, I don't have to tell you how wrong this is. I sent a letter along with Senator Van Hollen, Warner, and Kane to Secretary Turner asking why the department is refusing to provide rehired probationary workers with back pay. So will you both commit, pursuant to the law and in concert with the law, to immediately provide back pay to restore as well health benefits according to the law to all recently reinstated HUD employees?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I look forward to discussing that issue with you, and it's my understanding that that's currently under litigation, so I can't comment on that, but I would like to discuss with you at the appropriate time and have a deeper conversation on that issue.
It's not under litigation. The court already ruled that these workers were entitled to back pay. And what we know is that as we've seen very often with this administration, they are not complying with the law. The order said that they had to be reinstated and be given back pay.
Senator, it's my understanding that it still is ongoing, but I can tell you one thing, that we will absolutely follow the law. I can promise you that.
Mr. Wohl?
Senator, as you know, if I were to be confirmed as general counsel, my counsel to HUD would always be to follow the law and the Constitution. To the extent that employees are owed any back pay, any benefits, we will absolutely make sure that we're in compliance with all applicable federal laws that protect employees.
Okay, and so you would reinstate that back pay if you were to learn, and I'm sure you will, that they have been denied that back pay.
Senator, if I learn that we have done something that is inconsistent with the law, we will take appropriate action to become compliant with the law, and we will always follow court orders.
Thank you. Okay, just a couple of other quick questions to Ms. Bowman. I want to just ask you also, this current administration has been aggressively downsizing the workforces of the federal financial regulatory agencies, and the DOGE guys have directed other regulatory agencies, including the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, as well as the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, to cut its bank examination staff. And I'm sure with your experience, you know that this could reduce scrutiny over our banking system. So the question is, do you agree that downsizing supervisory staff at the Fed and other regulatory agencies could threaten the safety and soundness of the American banking system?
Senator Alsobrooks, I appreciate the question, and I look forward to meeting you at some point in the future to discuss these issues that might be important to you. I do believe that our examination staffs are of the most importance when we're talking about how we execute our responsibilities under supervision for our bank, for the safety and stability and soundness of the banking system. So if I were to do a review of our supervision and regulation division, should I be confirmed, I would certainly be very sensitive to the fact that we need to be able to fully and effectively implement our responsibilities for bank regulation.
And so indiscriminately firing the men and women who are responsible for that, you would agree, would threaten the soundness of our system?
It seems as though it would be important to understand the composition of the workforce and ensure that those that were subject to any removal would be appropriately made.
Okay, it looks like my time is going. I yield. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That concludes the question and answer portion of today's hearing. I'd like to thank our nominees for testifying before the committee today, and thank you for your willingness to serve our country. For senators, all follow-on questions for the record must be submitted by noon Wednesday, April the 16th for our witnesses. Please respond by Wednesday, April 23rd at 5 p.m. to the written questions you receive in order to facilitate this committee promptly processing these nominations. With that, the hearing is adjourned.